Next on Currents News, reaction from priests and parishioners after the Brooklyn Diocese releases the names of clergy credibly accused of sexual abuse against minors. Making the list public, just the latest step the diocese has taken on its path to reconciliation with survivors. We'll take a closer look at all of the measures enacted over the years to prevent abuse. Also tonight, fallout after Theodore McCarrick is defrocked from the priesthood for sexual wrongdoing. And the Holy Father is asking Catholics worldwide to pray for this week's Global Summit on Abuse at the Vatican. A busy day of news starts right now.
We know this list will generate many emotions for victims who have suffered terribly. For their suffering, I am truly sorry.
Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio releasing a video message on the same day the names of clergy credibly accused of sexual abuse against minors is published. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. The list was released on Friday. Now priests and parishioners are speaking out about the painful revelations. For more on what's being said and what's revealed in the list, Currents News' Emily Drewby is here. Emily.
Liz, today I spoke with several priests and parishioners within the Diocese of Brooklyn. Many tell me they're shocked and hurt by the list, but also encouraged by the transparency the Brooklyn Diocese showed by releasing it.
I think it's important that the diocese has done this.
I'm happy that the church and the diocese is doing the best they can to be as open and sincere about responding to the people in their hurt.
Priests across the Brooklyn Diocese also speaking out after the list of clergy credibly accused of sexual abuse against minors was released.
It has a little bit of an impact here because 7 of the priests that are on the list were assigned here at one point. So it has taken a little bit of breath out of the parish.
It's tough. It's tough to see something like this. But I pray for my brothers, and we pray that the Lord will continue to strengthen us.
The full list can be found on the Diocese of Brooklyn's website, dioceseofbrooklyn.org, by clicking on a special page made for the clergy sex abuse crisis response. There's also a video statement by Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio.
I have met with many victims who have told me that more than anything, they want an acknowledgement of what was done to them.
The list covers the 166-year history of the diocese. There are 108 names, 1 auxiliary bishop, 2 deacons, and 105 priests. Less than 5% of clergy throughout the history of the Diocese of Brooklyn since 1853. The list a shock for many.
These are priests that I've lived with. These are priests that I've ministered with. These are priests who are friends. So it is kind of disheartening. We will be stronger because of it, and I think that's what we can come forth with.
Almost 2/3 of the accused clergy on the list are dead. Numbers show incidents of abuse peaked in the 1960s and 1970s, but most reports came in after both 2002, when the Dallas Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People was enacted, and 2017, after the Brooklyn Diocese started the Independent Reconciliation and Compensation Program, which works to provide healing and closure for survivors of clergy sexual abuse. Priests we spoke with say they hope the list being released will help the victims move forward, heal, and recognize that those on the list will never be able to do anything like this again to another person. They also commend Bishop DiMarzio for his very clear stance of a zero-tolerance policy. Liz?
Thank you so much for that report, Emily. By publishing the names, Bishop DiMarzio fulfilled a pledge he made during his regional meetings with the lay faithful in Brooklyn and Queens last year. But that's not the only thing the bishop has done over the years to prevent and stop abuse. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports.
The clergy list is the latest step the diocese is taking to protect children and help survivors. But for years, the church in Brooklyn and Queens and Bishop DiMarzio have been very active in combating the scourge of abuse. He held regional meetings with the faithful in both boroughs last year. That's when he pledged to release the names of clergy credibly accused of abuse. In each of the 4 sessions, he answered every question that anyone wanted to ask. As part of his zero-tolerance policy, the bishop established an independent reporting telephone number that's linked directly to the district attorney's office for investigation. The diocese also has the Safe Environment Office, run by Mary Ellen Quinn. She is in charge of training programs that prevent abuse.
The diocese is required to train and screen all adults who have access to children, and we are also required to instruct our children.
We're just going to call those private parts of our bodies that we need to keep clean, safe, and protected the bathing suit zone.
According to Quinn, so far 60,000 children are instructed each year on how to identify and report abuse, and 82,000 adults, including clergy and lay people, have been taught to be on the lookout for signs of abuse.
You can protect some of God's children in just what you learn in this class tonight.
Jasmine Salazar is the diocese's vice chancellor and victim assistance coordinator.
The diocese is heavily involved in outreach to victims and providing assistance to victims who were abused as minors by a member of the clergy.
That includes therapy and the annual Mass of Hope and Healing, organized by abuse survivors. The Independent Reconciliation and Compensation Program started in 2017 to compensate survivors as a means of healing and closure. When the list of clergy was released Friday, Bishop DiMarzio also put out a video to communicate with the faithful.
In the past 17 years, there have been 2 credible cases involving active diocesan clergy in the Diocese of Brooklyn. While even one is too many, this shows that we are on the right path to ensuring these horrendous acts of abuse are never repeated.
Anthony Hughes is a survivor who says he was ignored when he first reported being abused to the church, but there's been a big change under Bishop DiMarzio.
They always return your call. They always are there for you when times are really tough. They've never turned their back on me in the last few years.
As the Independent Reconciliation and Compensation Program wraps up, Bishop DiMarzio says the diocese is committed to continuing to assist victims and will conduct a private compensation program for those who wish to participate. Outside of diocesan headquarters, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Well, joining me now is Anthony Hughes to talk more about the list of credibly accused priests. Anthony, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your taking the time. We just watched Tim's package. You are a survivor of sexual abuse, and you're also a member of the Diocese Survivors Advisory Committee. Please share your story.
My story obviously was I was a victim of abuse by a priest back in the 80s and early 90s. I would guess you don't remember those dates too well.
Of course not. Was it something that began right away? Were you able to identify immediately that this was not right?
No,
Okay.
It hides. You there's something, once it happens, you forget it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to realize that some trauma had happened to you. And growing up from a very poor family, the priest was very helpful to my family.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like Jesus Christ entering our home at the time.
And it seems that that's the tie that binds, that there's this trust factor that is betrayed. When you finally realized what was happening, what was your first recourse?
My first recourse, I was scared.
Okay.
Frightened, nervous. You don't know who to turn to because you don't think that anybody's going to believe what had taken place at the time.
We talk a lot about healing after these horrific events. Explain to me, what does that process look like for you personally?
Wow, healing is very tough. You know, I've had doors slammed in my face because I had turned back to the Catholic Church after I realized something had happened in my 20s. I had turned back, and doors were actually slammed in my face telling me, well, he's dead, there's nothing you can do about it any longer. So healing was a long journey.
Mm-hmm. So you play an active role in helping the diocese kind of put these pieces together and help survivors like yourself and help people like me and our viewers understand. How has that process been for you?
Actually, what I do is every once in a while I get a call to speak to another victim on how to deal or try to cope with what's happening and explain what the church is now offering to help get through the disaster that they've been through.
Anthony, we now have a list of priests credibly accused of abuse. Just in the simplest terms, how do you feel about that?
I always have mixed thoughts on that because people who have not come forward, it can actually bring up some bad memories and some bad feelings. And people that it has helped realize now, okay, that this is what's happening, and now the church is not hiding is now turning the corner to help as much as they can with the names of the priests that were brought out. It does help survivors, but I think people that are victims still, it's going to take some real time.
Where do we go from here, though? We have the lists. We see what our diocese is doing. We see what other dioceses are trying to do. Where would you like to see it go from here?
What we need to do, we need to educate our current priest to not turn their back on any victim or any survivor that needs to speak. They need to listen to us, they need to hear us, and they need to pray with us and continue along with our journey. It's important they put into their everyday life our journey as well, because their prayers are going to continue to help us.
What are your trust issues like for current priests now in the diocese?
I trust them. I mean, I've been around quite a few of them, and they're all on the same page with us. They're doing the right job, and I don't think they're going to cross those lines.
All right. Anthony, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with us, and your courage inspires me.
My pleasure.
I look forward to speaking with you a lot more during this process.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Diocese of Brooklyn's website now has a special section where people can go to get all the information in one place. It includes the newly released clergy list as well as videos and resources. Go to dioceseofbrooklyn.org and on the home page, click on Clergy Sex Abuse Crisis Response. The toll-free and confidential sexual abuse reporting line you heard about in Tim's report is 888-634-4499. There's a lot more news headed your way. Bishops across the U.S. are speaking out after Theodore McCarrick is expelled from the priesthood. The American ex-cardinal was found guilty of sex abuse. Pope Francis is summoning top bishops worldwide to a sex abuse summit at the Vatican. Tonight, a look ahead to the highly anticipated sessions that start Thursday. I'll talk to a leading Jesuit about what he calls the key to the future of the church in America, reforming the seminaries. Tonight, he's Mr. Theodore McCarrick, and American bishops are supporting the action after the prominent ex-cardinal was expelled from the priesthood. A Vatican trial judged him guilty of sexual wrongdoing involving children and seminarians. The leader of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, is calling the verdict a clear signal that abuse will not be tolerated, saying no bishop, no matter how influential, is above the law of the church. I pray this judgment will be one small step among many toward healing. The chain of events that led to McCarrick's downfall started in the New York Archdiocese when the church investigated a charge that he had abused a minor and last year found the accusation credible. Delia Gallagher reports on a career that moved from being a power broker in Washington to ultimate disgrace in Rome.
He is the one who has saved us.
He was once a prince of the church and a friend of presidents. Former Washington, D.C. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick enjoyed a spectacular career at the heart of power in Washington and in Rome. When the U.S. cardinals were summoned to the Vatican by John Paul II in 2002 at the beginning of the sex abuse scandal, Cardinal McCarrick was the reassuring face of that crisis, advocating zero tolerance for abusers, even as there were unrevealed allegations against him.
I can't see how anyone in the United States today would cover up something like that.
Theodore McCarrick was created a cardinal in 2001 by John Paul II. Around that time, an American priest wrote to the Vatican to warn them of rumors that the cardinal was sexually abusing seminarians. But no action was taken for years, until according to the Vatican under Benedict XVI, McCarrick was quietly advised not to travel or to be seen in public and live a discreet life of prayer and penance to avoid further rumors of his sexual misconduct with seminarians. But then in June last year, accusations that McCarrick had abused a minor were found credible by an internal church investigation in New York. Although McCarrick maintained his innocence, he resigned as cardinal. something that has rarely happened in the history of the Catholic Church. Finally, he was brought to trial at the Vatican, though by now 88 years old and infirm, he did not attend in person.
There's a warning tonight from the Pope's top sex abuse investigator. There could be more McCarricks in the church. Archbishop Charles Scicluna says work is constantly being done to identify them, and a leading U.S. organization dedicated to documenting sex abuse is naming 5 clergy who they say, like McCarrick, should be expelled from the priesthood. Bishop Accountability is calling for the ouster of Archbishop John Neinstadt from Minnesota, Archbishop Anthony Aporin from Guam, Bishop Aldo Pagoto from Brazil, Bishop Roger Vang He Lu from Belgium, and Bishop Joseph Hart from Wyoming. According to the group, all 5 men have been removed from former church jobs. No comment yet from any of them. Final preparations are underway for the highly anticipated Vatican summit about the sex abuse scandals. The Pope is calling the crisis an urgent challenge of our time.
Invito a pregare per questo appuntamento che ho voluto come atto di forte responsabilità pastorale davanti a una sfida urgente del nostro tempo.
The summit starts on Thursday. Abuse survivors will participate along with religious leaders from around the world. Today, Vatican organizers announced several new actions launched in connection with the summit. Melissa Butts is standing by at St. Peter's Square with the story. Melissa.
Organizers for the Summit on Sexual Abuse today launched a website with resources for the meeting and also results of a survey from bishops from around the world with safeguarding guidelines that they use in their diocese. This website with background resources and official Holy See documents was presented at a Vatican press conference just days before the Summit on Sexual Abuse begins.
The media's commitment to the story has been extremely important. And we would like to be your partners this week.
Thus, the website provides a press kit with 9 elements to help clarify any questions. There's also a timeline from 1984 until the present and safeguarding guidelines and practices for this questionnaire gathered from conferences around the world.
A survey, a questionnaire, was initiated among the conference participants, which is currently being evaluated by the Center for Child Protection of the Pontifical Gregorian University.
This questionnaire is only the first phase, they say, of a longer process they hope to continue even after the summit. It's the beginning of the Vatican's evaluation and implementation of responsibility, accountability, and transparency, the 3 themes for the meeting. So in order to find out more information about the Summit on Sexual Abuse, be sure to check out the website with bios of all the speakers who will be speaking and also a full program of these 3.5 days here in Rome. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
Thank you, Melissa. For the Vatican Summit website with the information Melissa described, go to pbc2019.org. Currents News will have team coverage of the Abuse Summit, including in-depth analysis from Crux editor John Allen and exclusive reports from national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux Christopher White. All this beginning this Thursday, February 21st at 7 p.m. Still to come on Currents News, I talk with Father Thomas Reese, a well-known Jesuit writer, about reforming what he calls the key to the American church. Cardinal Timothy Dolan's commitment to soon-to-be moms, so none are forced to consider abortion. We'll be right back. Ahead of the Vatican Sex Abuse Summit, a well-known Jesuit writer says the key to the future of the U.S. Church lies in its seminaries. Father Thomas Reese joins us now to talk about his new column where he makes the case for reform. Father Reese, always such a great pleasure to talk with you.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Overhauling the seminaries in America would likely be a long, involved process, Father Reese. What's the first step there?
I think the first step is to make sure that the screening process for people who enter the seminary is rigorous and on target. I mean, currently we have a process where, of course, there is a police background check on any seminarian, anybody who wants to enter a seminary. But that's a pretty low bar to make sure that the person doesn't have a criminal record. In addition, there are also psychological exams that these candidates take. Now, the question is, okay, you give them the exam, but do you listen to the psychologist who reviews them? I've heard from some psychologists that they will warn a bishop, oh, don't take this guy. I mean, I knew one who said this to a bishop, and the bishop took him anyway, and the man attempted suicide a couple of months after he entered the seminary. This man never should have been allowed into a seminary. He needed extensive therapy. So I think, the problem is that bishops are desperate for priests, and their vocation directors are, their value and worth is measured by how many recruits they get for the seminary.
So it's more about quantity there than quality.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to be worried about quality, not quantity. It's not numbers, it's how good a priest they will be.
And Father Reese, another obstacle that you write about is that there's an authoritarian mindset at these institutions, calling that a big obstacle to form better priests. How do you go about reforming that?
Well, frankly, I think you have to do it by changing the personnel involved in the seminary training. During the last two papacies, the criteria for someone teaching on the faculty is that he never questioned anything that came out of the Vatican. Well, they basically told the seminarians, we're going to give you the answers, and you're going to go out there and straighten out the people. They didn't train them to listen. They didn't train them to be pastors. They didn't train them to empower the laity to take their full responsibility in the church.
And Father Reese, that you bring up the laity, there are lay people on seminary faculties. Has this made any notable difference?
Not really, because they are selected. They've been selected by the same criteria as the priests have been. Now, some of the seminaries are improving, and some of them, for example, Cardinal Supich has been improving the seminary at Mundelein. And there are others, but until the bishops change their attitude on what kind of priests they want, I don't think we're going to see serious change.
All right, Father Reese, we definitely have to leave it there. That's the perfect last word. Thank you so much. Always so great talking with you.
Good to be with you.
New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan is vowing the church will do everything it can to help pregnant women so that no mother-to-be ever thinks abortion is her only option. During a press conference today, Dolan was joined by the Sisters of Life and other organizations who provide services to expectant mothers. Dolan assured the women that the Archdiocese is here to help.
Any pregnant woman can come to this Archdiocese of New York, to its parishes and facilities, and we will do all in our power to assist you, to welcome you, so that you never have to feel that you have no alternative except an abortion.
The Archdiocese does not ask about marital status, immigration status, or even religious affiliations for women seeking help. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.